If you own property in San Francisco or if you're thinking about buying, it could cost you $250,000 in the next 10 years. I'm not talking about property tax. I'm not talking about maintenance. I'm talking about a city ordinance that's already killing property values, and it could displace up to 15,000 people. And if you don't know about it yet, then you need to watch this entire video because I just came from a town hall meeting where property owners are livid. And what I learned is going to blow your mind. So stay with me because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how this affects you and what it's going to cost. And most importantly, what can you do about it? Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Lisa Vukovic, a local real estate agent in San Francisco, and I make videos all about San Francisco real estate and everything you need to know about living here. And trust me, this topic is a hot one right now for homeowners and high-rise buildings. So here's what happened. I have clients who are making an offer on a building in San Francisco, and during our due diligence period, we discovered that this property falls under the city's fire sprinkler retrofit ordinance. Now, I've heard about this ordinance before, but I didn't realize how serious the situation was until I attended this town hall meeting this past Thursday. What I learned at the meeting shocked me, and I mean genuinely shocked me. We're talking about costs that could bankrupt property owners and construction that's physically impossible in some situations, and thousands of San Francisco residents who could lose their homes. So today I'm going to break it down, everything you need to know about this ordinance. And I will share real numbers from that town hall and explain what options property owners actually have. All right, let's start with the basics. What exactly is the fire sprinkler ordinance? The San Francisco Fire Sprinkler Retrofit Ordinance impacts 124 buildings that were built before 1974 and that are 12 stories or higher. The ordinance requires that they put sprinklers inside the units in the living rooms and bedrooms, and some of these towers are 32 stories high. Now, the city's goal here is understandable. Fire sprinklers save lives. They can contain fires before they spread and give residents more time to escape. From a pure safety standpoint, nobody's arguing that principle. But here's where it gets complicated. The ordinance gives property owners a 10-year deadline to complete the retrofit. And when I say retrofit, I don't mean just installing sprinkler heads. We're talking about complete fire suppression systems that include new plumbing, pressure systems, water supply upgrades, and in many cases, major structural modifications. The buildings affected by the ordinance are spread throughout San Francisco. So if you own a building built before 1975 and it's 12 stories or more, there's a good chance it's on the list. And if you're buying property, you need to verify whether it falls under this requirement before you make an offer and understand the financial consequences that it has. The 10-year deadline might sound like a lot of time, but considering the cost, the complexity, and the shortage of contractors who can do this work, many property owners are already feeling the pressure. And that pressure is about to get a whole lot worse. Now, let's talk about money, because this is where it gets absolutely insane. At the town hall meeting Thursday, we heard from the president, who is the founder of a coalition heading up this ordinance. And this person has been at the forefront dealing with this ordinance and the homeowners. And he shared some numbers that made everyone stop. For their building, the estimated cost of the sprinkler retrofit is $2.3 million. So the entire building, that would end up breaking down cost per unit. We're looking at somewhere between $200,000 and $225,000 a unit. Now let that sink in for a second. $225,000 a unit. Many of the people there are on fixed incomes or they're retired And there were people in their 80s and even a 90-year-old woman who has mobility issues and doesn't know where she would go if she can't stay in her condo. There was a couple who was retired and they put all their money into being owners at their building, and this would add cost for this project would cost them another $2,500 a month for the next 10 years, on top of the $2,000 HOA dues they pay to maintain the building. And they can't afford it. They'd be forced to sell at a huge loss. For owners of apartment buildings who have tenants, they can't pass that huge amount of money onto the tenants. San Francisco lets owners pass the costs on to tenants, but how realistic is that? You can't just raise rent by thousands of dollars to cover the sprinkler retrofit. Even if you could, the market wouldn't support those kinds of increases when tenants can just move to another building that doesn't have those costs baked into the rent. So property owners are stuck and they're facing with six-figure bills with no way to recoup that investment. And that brings me to the next issue that came up at the town hall. Here's something that nobody really is talking about in the mainstream media. This ordinance is already devastating property values. At the town hall meeting, we heard from multiple owners who said in their building, a couple of people have had to sell this year, and they've experienced a huge loss in property values because of the unknown hanging over the property. And I can tell you from my own experience, buyers are absolutely terrified about this. Think about it from a buyer's perspective. You're looking at a property, and during the inspection period, you discover it needs a sprinkler retrofit. Suddenly, you're not just buying a building, you're buying a building plus a $225,000 per unit liability that you have to complete in the next 10 years. So what do buyers do? Walk away. Or they're going to lowball and ultimately bring property values down. And here's the cruel irony. Many of these owners bought their properties as long-term investments. They've been good landlords. They've maintained their buildings. They've played by all the rules. And now the city is essentially hitting them with this massive tax in the form of a retrofit requirement. For my clients who are making an offer right now, this is a huge consideration. Do we factor in the full cost of a retrofit and lower the offer? Do we try to negotiate a credit? Or do we just walk away and find a property that doesn't have this problem? Now, here's where things go from bad to worse, because it's not just about cost. In some buildings, this retrofit is literally impossible to complete in some of the buildings. At the town hall, someone brought up an example of the building 66 Clary Court. This building has 8-foot ceilings and now might have to install the fire sprinklers, and so you would lose that ceiling height. How much ceiling height? In this particular case, after the sprinkler installation, the ceiling would be 7 feet and 1 inch. 7 feet and 1 inch, that actually makes the unit illegal because the height requirement is 8 feet to be considered livable space. Another example was a 12-story building that was made out of concrete. No steel, just concrete. And if they have to break into the concrete and install these sprinklers, it compromises the structural integrity of the building. It was very obvious this notification went out and was not done with any research and even knowing if it's possible to do. This isn't just an isolated case. There's buildings all over the city where retrofit simply is not feasible because of the building's construction or the ceiling heights, the existing plumbing infrastructure, or historical preservation requirements. Imagine owning a building where a retrofit is physically impossible, but you're still required by law to do it. What do? You can't comply, but you can't ignore the ordinance either. That's why property owners are calling for more realistic exemptions, which brings me to the next point, the good news, if you can call it that. The ordinance does include some exemptions. The bad news is that those exemptions are limited and the process to obtain them is still unclear. According to what we heard at the town hall, The board supervisor, Danny Sauter, and supervisor Stephen Terrell were there, and they said they're going to work on getting three types of exemptions available. First, there's a hardship exemption. This is for property owners who can demonstrate that the cost of the retrofit would create an undue financial hardship. Now, what constitutes an undue hardship? It's somewhat subjective. So, if you're a small property owner who simply can't afford a $200,000 bill, you might qualify. Second, there's a feasibility exemption. This is for situations like the one I mentioned at 66 Cleary Court, where the retrofit is physically impossible because it would create code violations. So, if your building's construction makes the retrofit infeasible, you should be able to get this exemption. And third, there's an exemption related to tenant displacement. The city recognizes that these retrofits could force tenants out of their homes, either temporarily during the construction or permanently if the building has to be sold or demolition because the owner can't afford the retrofit. And that brings me to one of the most important disturbing statistics from the town hall. An estimated 15,000 people could be displaced by this ordinance. 15,000 people in a city that's already facing a housing crisis, in a city where median rent is already astronomical. We're talking about displacing 15,000 residents because of a retrofit requirement that many property owners simply cannot afford to complete. So, what property owners need to do? What do you need to do if you own a building that falls under this ordinance? Or if you're thinking about buying one? Make sure you verify whether the property is actually subject to the ordinance. Not all buildings are affected, and the city has specific criteria based on construction, building type, and number of units. You can check with the San Francisco Fire Department to see if your building got the notice. If your building is subject to the ordinance, you need to get cost estimates immediately and reach out to the fire department to find out what the process is to file for an exemption if it qualifies. Also, start getting involved with this coalition that's fighting the mandate. The city needs to hear from you now, and it's impacting the real people and the real communities. Look, I understand the city's motivation here. Fire safety is important. Nobody wants people to lose their lives in a preventable fire. Our goal is not to oppose safety improvements, but to encourage a thoughtful, realistic approach, one that balances safety with financial feasibility and protects San Franciscans from undue hardship. Many cities have successfully phased in similar requirements after conducting a more comprehensive costs and impact study, and we believe San Francisco can do the same. If you're a property owner in San Francisco, you cannot afford to ignore this. The 10-year deadline might seem far away, but it's coming faster than you think. The building needs to submit a compliance schedule 1 year after receiving the notice. They need to have permits for the work by 2027, and the work needs to be completed by 2035. If you're thinking about buying property in San Francisco, you need to factor this in to your due diligence. Don't assume that just because the building looks good and the numbers work on paper, that you're not walking into a financial nightmare. This is a huge issue that's going to affect thousands of people in San Francisco over the next decade. The more we talk about it, the more awareness we raise, and the better chance we have at finding solutions that work for everyone. If you found this video useful, please hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll be following up with this issue closely and providing updates as the situation develops. Drop a comment below and let me know if you have been affected by this ordinance. And if so, what is the plan with dealing with it? I'd love to hear it. And if you're buying or selling property in San Francisco and need expert guidance on navigating issues like this, feel free to reach out. My contact information is in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.